Daniel stood at his workstation, adjusting the power circuits on Helios 9, a deep space research station orbiting a distant star. The air inside was calm, the soft hum of machines filling the silent corridors. It was just another routine day, until the alarms blared. Unidentified ship detected. No authorization code received. The robotic voice echoed through the station. Red warning lights flashed across the control panels. Daniel frowned and turned to the nearest screen. A ship was approaching. It wasn't one of theirs. The design was unfamiliar, sleek, dark metal with glowing blue energy lines running along its hull. It looked like nothing built by humans. The station's defense system was already scanning it, searching for any threats. But then something strange happened. An alert popped up on Daniel's screen. Human DNA signature detected on board. His eyes widened. How could that be? This was alien technology, yet somehow there was a human presence inside. Security report, Daniel said, activating his communicator. A voice crackled through. Sir, the ship has docked. We have a visitor. Daniel hurried toward the docking bay, his mind racing with questions. The last time Helios 9 had visitors, it was a scheduled supply ship. This was different. As he stepped into the bay, he saw a small team of security officers standing stiffly, weapons at their sides but not raised. Their eyes were fixed on the tall figure standing before them. Daniel followed their gaze. The alien warrior stood at the center of the bay. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. She was tall, almost 7 feet, with smooth violet skin that shimmered under the station's white lights. Her long, dark hair was tied back, revealing sharp, angular features and glowing amber eyes. She wore a form-fitting battle suit, made of dark, flexible material with metallic plates covering her arms and legs. A long blade rested at her side, but she made no move to grab it. Then, to Daniel's shock, she spoke. Daniel. His name, spoken in perfect English. He stiffened. You know me. The alien woman nodded. She took a step forward, and the security team tensed, gripping their weapons. But she didn't attack. Instead, she looked at Daniel with an expression he couldn't understand. Then she said the words that froze him in place. Meet your son. Daniel blinked. What? The woman stepped aside, revealing a small figure standing behind her. A boy. He looked human, mostly. He had dark brown hair, messy and slightly curled. His skin was lighter than the alien woman's, but there was a faint shimmer to it, like hers. His eyes, however, were the most striking. They glowed softly, the same amber color as hers. The boy stared at Daniel, silent and unsure. Daniel took a step back. His mind was racing. This had to be some kind of mistake. I don't have a son, he said firmly. I don't even know you. The alien warrior's expression didn't change. You may not know me, she said, her voice calm but firm. But he is yours. Daniel shook his head. That's impossible. I've never. He stopped, struggling to find the right words. I don't even know your species. She tilted her head slightly. We are the Zavarians. Daniel had never heard of them. He had studied alien encounters, but nothing in the records mentioned a species like hers. This is some kind of trick, he said. I don't know how you got here, but I am not. His DNA matches yours, she interrupted. You are his father. Daniel looked at the boy again. The child didn't speak, but there was something in his eyes, something familiar. A quiet intelligence, a curiosity, a hesitation. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. This couldn't be real. And yet, deep down, he wasn't sure if he could deny it. Before he could say another word, a new alarm sounded. Warning. Unknown vessels detected. Multiple ships approaching. The alien warrior's expression darkened. She turned toward the docking bay doors. They found us, she said. Daniel's heart pounded. Who? She turned back to him, her eyes glowing brighter. The ones who want him dead. The alarm's sharp tone echoed through Helios 9. sending a wave of tension through the docking bay. Red lights flashed across the control panels, warning of incoming ships. Daniel's mind was still struggling to process what the alien warrior had just told him, but now there was no time to argue. The woman turned to face the docking doors, her sharp amber eyes narrowing. They found us faster than I expected. Daniel clenched his fists. Who found us? She looked at him, her expression serious. Zavarian enforcers. They believe your son should not exist. Daniel's breath caught. He looked at the boy, Kai, who stood silently beside the alien woman, his small hands clenched into fists. He wasn't crying, but his glowing eyes showed fear. Before Daniel could respond, a voice crackled over the station's comm system. Captain Daniel, unidentified warships are closing in. We need orders. Daniel exhaled sharply and pressed his communicator. How many ships? 3. No, 4. They're surrounding the station. Daniel turned to the alien warrior. Can we talk to them? Negotiate. Her jaw tightened. There is nothing to say. They will not listen. Their mission is simple. Erase the child. Daniel's stomach twisted. He was still trying to understand what was happening, but one thing was clear. This was real. The boy was in danger. He looked at Kai again. He had his features, his nose, his jawline. The child did look like him. But those eyes, those were his mother's. And now, people wanted him dead. Daniel inhaled sharply and turned back to the warrior. What's your name? The woman straightened. Veshana. Daniel nodded. All right, Veshana. You brought this boy here. Do you have a plan to keep him alive? She hesitated. For the first time, he saw something flicker in her expression. Uncertainty. She had risked everything to get here, but she had no escape plan. Daniel swore under his breath and tapped his communicator. Control room, what's our status? A static-filled response came back. They are demanding we hand over the abomination. Their words, sir. Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at Kai again. The boy lowered his head, as if he already knew how the universe saw him. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. He didn't know this child, and he certainly hadn't asked for any of this. But there was one thing he knew for certain. He wasn't going to let them take him. He turned to Veshana. Get ready to fight. Her amber eyes flickered with something close to respect. She nodded. Daniel pressed his communicator again. Security team, arm yourselves. Nobody hands over the boy. Prepare for combat. A hesitant response came. Sir, are you sure? They outnumber us. Daniel's voice was firm. Then we even the odds. Veshana pulled out a sleek metallic device from her belt and tapped it. Instantly, a glowing blue shield flared around her body. She handed a second device to Daniel. This will protect you from their weapons. Daniel secured it to his wrist. What kind of weapons are we dealing with? Plasma rifles, Veshana said. Fast, deadly, but slow to recharge. We can use that. Daniel exhaled. This wasn't the first time he had faced danger, but it was the first time he had to protect a child. His child. The station shook violently as the enemy ships fired their first warning shots. The docking bay doors trembled from the impact. A voice echoed over the comms, cold and emotionless. Surrender the child, and we will spare your station. Daniel stepped forward and pressed the communicator. Come and take him. Veshana gave him a sharp look, then smiled slightly. You might be more Zavarian than you think, Daniel. Kai looked up at him with wide eyes. For the first time, Daniel saw something in them besides fear. Hope. The battle was about to begin. The station trembled as another blast hit its outer shields. The Zavarian warships were getting impatient. Their demand was clear: hand over the child or be destroyed. Daniel stood in the center of the docking bay, his heart pounding. He had spent years solving problems with technology, not weapons. But now he was standing between a powerful alien force and the child they wanted gone. Veshana was already in motion, moving with the fluid grace of a trained warrior. She tapped a panel on her wrist, and a holographic display flickered into existence. A map of Helios 9. "They will breach here first," she said, pointing to the main corridor leading to the docking bay. "Once inside, they will spread out. We must stop them before they reach Kai." Daniel looked at the small boy beside her. Kai's glowing amber eyes were filled with worry, but he didn't speak. He simply watched and listened, as if trying to understand the danger surrounding him. Daniel exhaled sharply and pressed his communicator. "Security. Status." A voice crackled through. "Sir, they've latched onto the station. Enemy forces preparing to board." Vaishana drew her weapon, a long curved energy blade that shimmered with blue light. "Stay behind me," she told Kai. Daniel picked up a plasma rifle from a nearby locker, its weight unfamiliar in his hands. He was an engineer, not a soldier. But right now, that didn't matter. The lights flickered. A loud clank echoed through the station as something attached to the hull. They were coming. The security doors at the far end of the corridor hissed open. 4 figures stepped through, Zyverian enforcers. They were tall, armored in dark metal suits, their glowing visors scanning the room. Each held a plasma rifle, aimed directly at Daniel and Vaishana. One of them took a step forward. His voice was cold, emotionless. "Give us the child." Daniel tightened his grip on the rifle. Not happening. The Zyverian enforcer raised his weapon. Before he could fire, Vaishana moved. In a blink, she was upon them. Her energy blade slashed through the first enforcer's weapon, sending sparks flying. She spun, knocking the second enemy back with a powerful kick. The third enforcer raised his rifle, but Daniel acted on instinct. He pulled the trigger. A bolt of energy shot forward, striking the enemy's shoulder. The enforcer staggered back, his armor absorbing most of the impact. The fourth enforcer lunged toward Kai. The boy gasped, stumbling backward. But before the enemy could reach him, a pulse of golden energy erupted from Kai's hands. A shockwave blasted through the corridor, sending the enforcers flying. Daniel shielded his eyes from the sudden burst of light. When he looked again, the Zyverian soldiers were motionless on the floor. Kai stood frozen, his small hands still glowing. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his eyes wide with fear. Daniel stared in shock. Did he just? Vaishana knelt beside Kai, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her voice was calm, reassuring. "It has begun." Kai looked up at her. "I didn't mean to." Vaishana shook her head. "You did what was necessary." Daniel exhaled. His son had powers. Not just strength, not just intelligence, raw energy. The alarms blared again. A new warning flashed across the control panel. More Zyverian forces detected. Reinforcements inbound. Vaishana stood. They will not stop. Not now. Daniel gritted his teeth. Then we need a way out. He tapped his communicator. Control room. Are the escape pods still functional? A frantic response came. Negative. They've been disabled. The only working ship is the one in the docking bay. Vaishana's ship. Daniel turned to her. Can you fly it? She nodded. Yes, but we must get there before more soldiers arrive. Daniel glanced at Kai. The boy looked shaken but determined. All right, Daniel said. Then let's move. The battle wasn't over yet, but now they had a plan. And Daniel was ready to fight for his son. The station trembled again as another explosion rocked its outer structure. The Zyverian warships were not waiting anymore. They were preparing for a full assault. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. The situation was getting worse. More enforcers would arrive soon, and if they were caught in the docking bay, there would be no way out. He looked at Kai, the small boy standing close to Vaishana. His son. He still couldn't believe it, but now was not the time to think about that. He had to get them out alive. Vaishana checked the energy levels on her weapon. We must reach my ship now. Daniel nodded. He tapped his communicator. Control room. What's the fastest route to the docking bay? A response came through the static. The main corridor is blocked. You'll have to take the service tunnels, but... The voice hesitated. Daniel frowned. But what? There are life signs inside, and they're not human. Veshana's eyes narrowed. More enforcers. Daniel took a deep breath. There was no other way. Then we go through them. Kai looked up at him. I don't want to hurt anyone. Veshana knelt beside him, her expression softening. You only defend yourself, Kai. Nothing more. Kai swallowed and nodded. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. Stay close to us. The three of them moved quickly, heading toward the access hatch that led into the station's maintenance tunnels. Daniel pressed a panel on the wall, and the hatch hissed open. Inside, the tunnel was dark, with only dim blue lights flickering along the walls. The air was heavy with the scent of metal and burning circuits. Daniel led the way, his plasma rifle raised. Veshana walked beside him, her blade glowing softly in the shadows. Kai followed closely, his eyes scanning their surroundings nervously. They moved carefully through the narrow passage, their footsteps echoing softly. Then Daniel heard it, a faint clicking sound, a low hum. His pulse quickened. Something was ahead. Veshana motioned for them to stop. She pressed a button on her wrist device, activating a small holographic scanner. 3 red dots appeared on the display. Enemies waiting just around the corner. Daniel whispered, "How do we get past them?" Veshana's eyes gleamed. "We don't. We strike first." Before Daniel could respond, she moved. She dashed forward, her blade cutting through the darkness. In a single motion, she slashed through the weapon of the first enforcer, sending sparks flying. The second enemy turned his rifle toward her, but Daniel acted fast. He fired his plasma gun, hitting the soldier in the chest. The third enforcer lunged toward Kai. Kai gasped and raised his hands. A burst of golden energy exploded outward. The enforcer was blasted back, crashing into the metal wall. He slumped to the ground, unconscious. Daniel's eyes widened. Kai. The boy looked at his hands, shaking slightly. I didn't mean to. Veshana placed a hand on his shoulder. You protected yourself. That is good. Daniel exhaled. His son had power, and it was only growing stronger. But there was no time to think about that now. They had to move. They stepped over the fallen enforcers and continued down the tunnel. After a few minutes, they reached another hatch. Daniel pressed the control panel, and the door slid open. Beyond it was the docking bay, and Veshana's ship. The sleek black vessel sat in the center of the room, its engines already glowing softly. The ship was their only chance to escape. Daniel sighed in relief, until he saw what was waiting for them. A group of Xaverian enforcers, blocking the path. Their weapons were raised. Their leader, a tall figure in heavy armor, stepped forward. His glowing red visor locked onto Kai. His voice was cold. The child belongs to us. Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon. Not a chance. The final battle was about to begin. The docking bay was silent, except for the hum of Veshana's ship and the distant alarms of the damaged station. Daniel stood firm, gripping his plasma rifle. Veshana held her glowing blade, her stance steady. Kai stood between them, his small hands clenched into fists. Across from them, Xaverian enforcers blocked the path to the ship. Their leader, a tall armored figure with a glowing red visor, took a step forward. His voice was cold and firm. The child belongs to us. Daniel's pulse pounded. They weren't here to negotiate. Veshana raised her blade. You will not take him. The leader tilted his head slightly. Then you will all die. The enforcers moved. Daniel fired first. A plasma bolt shot across the docking bay, striking one of the enforcers in the shoulder. Sparks erupted as the energy impacted the armor, but the soldier barely flinched. The Xaverian forces returned fire. Bright red energy bolts streaked toward them. Daniel ducked behind a supply crate as plasma shots slammed into the walls. Vashana moved fast, deflecting 2 blasts with her blade before leaping forward. She cut through one enforcer's weapon, then spun and kicked another away. Kai pressed himself against the crate, breathing hard. His glowing eyes darted around in fear. Daniel grabbed his arm. "Kai, listen to me. Stay down and don't move." Kai nodded quickly, his small hands trembling. More enforcers charged. Daniel took aim and fired again. 1 shot, 2 shots. 1 enforcer fell, but another kept coming. Suddenly, the leader raised his arm. A pulse wave shot from his gauntlet, slamming into Daniel. Daniel was thrown backward, hitting the ground hard. His rifle skidded across the floor, out of reach. His vision blurred. He heard Kai call out, but his body wouldn't move fast enough. The Zavarian leader walked toward the boy. "You cannot escape fate, child." Kai backed away, his eyes wide with fear. Vashana moved to block the leader's path, her blade flashing in an arc. But the leader caught it with his gauntlet. A surge of energy blasted from his armor, knocking Vashana away. She hit the ground hard, groaning in pain. Daniel's heart pounded. No, not like this. The leader reached for Kai. The boy squeezed his eyes shut. Golden light flared around him. A powerful shockwave exploded outward. The Zavarian leader staggered back as golden energy surged from Kai's body. It pulsed like a living force, crackling in the air. The enforcers hesitated. For the first time, they looked uncertain. The leader growled, "Control it, or it will destroy you." Kai shook his head. His voice was small but firm. "You can't take me." His hands lifted, and the energy around him expanded. The Zavarian soldiers were pushed back by an invisible force. Sparks flew from their armor as the golden light crackled around them. Vashana, struggling to her feet, shouted, "Kai, use it to push them back. Don't let it consume you." Kai looked at her, then at Daniel. Then he exhaled. The energy swirled around him, then shot outward like a massive wave. The Zavarian enforcers were flung across the docking bay, crashing into walls and crates. Some hit the ground hard, their weapons sparking. Others scrambled to stand, but their movements were slow and unsteady. The leader staggered, his red visor flickering. He looked at Kai, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he activated a recall signal on his gauntlet. A bright blue flash filled the docking bay. And in the next moment, he and his surviving enforcers vanished. Silence fell. Daniel pushed himself up, his chest aching. He turned to Kai, who stood trembling, his hands still glowing softly. Vashana reached out, gently touching the boy's shoulder. "You did well." Kai blinked up at her. I don't understand what I did." Vashana's expression was unreadable. "Your power is awakening, and they fear it." Daniel took a shaky breath. His son wasn't just special. He was dangerous. The station's alarms blared louder. More Zavarian ships were approaching. Daniel grabbed Kai's hand. "No time to think. We need to go. Now." Vashana nodded and helped Kai into the ship. Daniel followed, sealing the hatch behind them. The engines roared to life. As the ship lifted off, Daniel looked out the viewport. The station was damaged, but still standing. And the Zavarians, they would be back. He turned to Kai. Whatever power he had, it was only beginning. And the whole universe would want to control it. The real fight was far from over. The ship shook violently as it left the docking bay. Outside, the deep void of space stretched in all directions, stars blinking like distant eyes. But there was no time to admire the view. Danger was right behind them. Daniel gripped the control panel as Vashana guided the ship away from Helios 9. Alarms blared in the cockpit, warning of incoming enemy ships. Kai sat in the co-pilot's seat, his small hands clenched in his lap. His golden eyes still glowed faintly from the energy he had released earlier. He looked exhausted but alert. Daniel turned to Veshana. How many are chasing us? Veshana's expression remained calm, but her fingers moved quickly over the controls. A holographic display appeared above the dashboard, showing 3 Zavarian warships closing in fast. They will intercept us in 2 minutes, she said. Daniel's stomach tightened. Can we outrun them? Veshana didn't answer immediately. She adjusted the ship's trajectory, weaving through the remains of old space wreckage near the station. The engines roared as she increased speed, but the Zavarian ships matched them easily. Daniel cursed under his breath. Of course they have faster ships. Kai looked up. What do they want from me? Veshana glanced at him. You are powerful, Kai. More than you know. They either want to control you or destroy you. Kai shivered. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. They won't get you, I promise. The ship jolted as the first plasma shot struck the shields. The blue energy barrier flickered, absorbing most of the impact, but it wouldn't last forever. Veshana's voice was sharp. We need an escape route. Now. Daniel scanned the navigation system. His eyes locked onto a large object ahead. A massive asteroid field. What about there? He pointed. Veshana followed his gaze and frowned. It is dangerous. Too many obstacles. Daniel smiled grimly. Exactly. If it's dangerous for us, it's dangerous for them too. Veshana hesitated for only a second, then nodded. Hold on. She pulled the controls sharply, sending the ship into a steep dive. The Zavarian ships fired again, but their shots missed as Veshana maneuvered through the chaos of space debris. Within moments, they plunged into the asteroid field. Massive rocks drifted around them, some spinning wildly. Smaller fragments smashed against the shields, causing the ship to rattle. Veshana's hands moved with precision, weaving the ship through the deadly maze. Daniel's heart pounded. Are they following? Veshana checked the scanners. Yes, but they are struggling to keep up. On the display, the Zavarian warships hesitated at the edge of the field. One of them tried to follow but crashed into a large asteroid, exploding in a bright flash. Daniel grinned. That's one down. The remaining 2 ships adjusted their approach, moving in cautiously. They are learning, Veshana muttered. Kai looked worried. What do we do? Daniel studied the navigation screen. We need a way out. Something they won't expect. Veshana nodded. There is an abandoned mining station deep in the field. If we reach it, we can lose them. She adjusted their course, pushing the engines to maximum. The Zavarian ships fired again. A plasma shot grazed their left wing, sending sparks flying. The ship tilted dangerously, but Veshana stabilized it. Daniel checked the shields. They were down to 30%. Kai gasped as a large asteroid loomed ahead. Look out! Veshana twisted the controls, sending the ship into a sharp barrel roll. They barely dodged the asteroid, the edge scraping against their hull with a loud grinding noise. Daniel exhaled. That was too close. Ahead, the abandoned mining station came into view. It was old, floating lifelessly between the asteroids. Veshana's eyes focused. We land there. She activated the stealth system, dimming the ship's energy signature. As soon as they reached the station, she powered down the engines and guided them into the shadows of the wrecked structure. The ship drifted into silence. Outside, the Zavarian warships slowed. Their scanners swept the asteroid field, searching for them. Daniel held his breath. If the Zavarians found them now, they were finished. Minutes passed. Then, the Zavarian ships turned away. Daniel exhaled in relief. We lost them. Veshana nodded. For now. Kai looked out of the window at the mining station. Where are we? Veshana's voice was quiet. A forgotten place, but it will keep us safe, for now. Daniel knew she was right, but deep inside, he also knew this was only the beginning. The Zavarians would come again, and next time, they wouldn't just be running. they would have to fight. The ship rested in the dark shadow of the abandoned mining station. Outside, massive asteroids drifted slowly, blocking out distant stars. The Xaverian warships had moved away, but Daniel knew they would return. This was only a temporary hiding place. Inside the cockpit, the dim emergency lights flickered as Veshana checked the ship's systems. The damage wasn't critical, but the left wing was scraped, and the shield generator needed time to recharge. Daniel exhaled and turned toward Kai. The boy sat quietly in the co-pilot's chair, staring at his hands. His golden eyes still glowed faintly, a reminder of the power he had used. Daniel crouched beside him. "Are you okay, kid?" Kai hesitated, then nodded. "I think so." But his voice was uncertain. Daniel exchanged a glance with Veshana. The energy blast Kai had released earlier had been powerful, maybe too powerful. Even the Xaverians had feared it. Veshana walked over, her expression calm but serious. "You felt something when you used your power, didn't you?" Kai looked up at her, biting his lip. It was strange, like something inside me woke up. It felt warm, like light. He clenched his fists, but it also scared me. Veshana nodded. "Power can be dangerous if you don't control it." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on Kai's shoulder. "Listen, kid, you saved us back there. That means this power of yours isn't just dangerous. It's also something good, but we need to understand it." Kai looked between them. "How do I do that?" Veshana studied him for a moment. Then she made a decision. "There is something I can show you." She motioned for them to follow and led them to the lower deck of the ship. The area was mostly used for storage, but in the center, there was a small training chamber, a circular space with smooth metal walls. Veshana walked to the middle of the room and turned toward Kai. "Stand here." Kai hesitated, then stepped forward. Daniel stood nearby, watching carefully. Veshana tapped a panel on the wall. The room hummed to life, and small floating orbs emerged from the ceiling. They hovered in the air, blinking softly. Kai looked at them in confusion. "What are those?" "Training drones," Veshana said. "They react to movement and energy." She turned to Kai. "I want you to focus. Try to reach that feeling you had before." Kai swallowed. "But what if I lose control?" Veshana's expression softened. "That is why we train. Power does not control you. You control it." Kai took a deep breath. He closed his eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the air around him shimmered. A faint golden glow appeared around his hands. The training drones reacted immediately, moving closer, sensing his energy. Kai opened his eyes in surprise. "I can feel them." Veshana nodded. "Good. Now, focus." The glow around Kai's hands grew stronger. The drones began to shift, spinning in the air as if pulled by an unseen force. Daniel watched in awe. His son was doing this, controlling it, not just reacting. But then, the glow flared too fast, too bright. The energy pulsed outward, and the drones were blasted across the room, smashing into the walls. Kai gasped and stumbled back, clutching his head. I didn't mean to." Daniel rushed to him. "It's okay, kid. You did great." Veshana stepped forward. "You lost control because you were afraid. Fear fuels power, but it also makes it wild." Kai looked down. "What if I can't control it?" Veshana knelt in front of him. "You can, but it will take time. Strength is not just about power. It is about knowing when to use it." Daniel nodded. "And you won't have to figure it out alone. We're with you, Kai." Kai looked up at them. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Okay, I'll try again." Veshana smiled slightly. "Good, but not now. You need rest." Daniel ruffled Kai's hair. "And food. Definitely food." Kai laughed softly, the tension easing. But even as they shared a small moment of peace, Daniel's mind remained sharp. The Xaverians would return. And when they did, Kai would need to be ready. The abandoned mining station was silent, hidden deep within the asteroid field. For now, they were safe. But Daniel knew it wouldn't last. Inside the ship, Kai sat in the cockpit, staring out at the drifting asteroids. His golden eyes reflected the dim light of the control panels. He wasn't just looking, he was thinking. Daniel walked in and leaned against the doorway. Couldn't sleep. Kai shook his head. Too many thoughts. Daniel sighed and took a seat next to him. Yeah, I know the feeling. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The soft hum of the ship filled the air. Then, Kai turned to him. Do you think the Zavarians will find us again? Daniel didn't want to lie. Yes, they won't stop looking for you. Kai's hands tightened into fists. Because of my power. Daniel nodded. Because they fear it. And what they fear, they want to control. Kai looked down. What if I can't stop them? Daniel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You don't have to stop them alone. You have me. You have Veshana. We fight together. Kai looked up at him. But what if I lose control again? Daniel gave him a small smile. Then we'll help you. That's what family does. Kai hesitated, then smiled back. Family. Before Daniel could respond, the ship's alarm suddenly blared. His heart jumped. Veshana's voice came through the comms. Get to the cockpit. Now. Daniel and Kai rushed to the controls. Veshana stood at the main console, her expression tense. What's happening? Daniel asked. Veshana pointed to the radar screen. 3 red dots were moving toward them fast. The Zavarians are back. Daniel cursed under his breath. They found us. Kai's face paled. What do we do? Veshana's fingers moved swiftly across the controls. We have one advantage. They don't know exactly where we are yet. The asteroids are interfering with their scanners. Daniel narrowed his eyes. So we still have time. Veshana nodded. A little, but we must decide. Run or fight. Daniel clenched his fists. Running had worked before, but this time, something felt different. His eyes met Veshana's. If we run, they'll just chase us again. Veshana nodded. And if they catch us in open space, we won't have cover. Kai swallowed. So, we fight. Daniel looked at him. Only if we have to. Veshana studied the radar. They are scanning the station. If we stay hidden, they might move on. But then, the red dots stopped moving. A deep robotic voice came through the ship's speakers. We know you are here. Surrender the child, and you will not be harmed. Kai's hands trembled. Daniel gritted his teeth. Yeah, right. They're bluffing. Veshana's expression darkened. No, they are stalling. Daniel's stomach dropped. For what? The station shook violently as a powerful energy beam struck its outer hull. Sparks flew from the control panels. Kai yelped and grabbed Daniel's arm. They're attacking. Veshana's hands flew over the controls. Shields at 40%. Another hit like that, and we're exposed. Daniel made his decision. No more running. He turned to Veshana. Can we fight? Veshana's eyes gleamed. Yes, but we need a plan. Daniel turned to Kai. Are you ready, kid? Kai's golden eyes burned with determination. I'll try. Daniel nodded. Then let's show them what we're made of. Outside, the Zavarian ships charged their weapons, preparing for another strike. Inside, Daniel and his crew prepared to fight back. The final battle was about to begin. The ship shook violently as another blast from the Zavarian warships struck the mining station's outer hull. Sparks rained down from the ceiling, and the warning alarms blared across the control panels. Daniel gripped the edge of the console to steady himself. They had no more time. Veshana's voice was sharp. Shields at 20%. Another direct hit, and we'll be exposed. Kai stood near the pilot's seat, his golden eyes filled with determination. His hands clenched into fists, and Daniel could see faint energy flickering around him. Daniel turned to Vashana. "Can we still use the station's defense systems?" Vashana checked the controls quickly. "Most of the old turrets are offline, but I can manually activate 2 of them. They won't stop the enemy, but they'll slow them down." "Do it," Daniel ordered. Vashana's fingers moved swiftly across the control panel. Outside, 2 massive turret cannons came to life. They turned toward the enemy ships and fired bright beams of energy. One of the Xaverian warships swerved, avoiding the attack, but the second ship was hit directly on its wing, sending it spinning off course. Daniel saw his chance. He turned to Kai. "It's time, kid. You're the only one who can stop them for good." Kai swallowed, his small hands trembling. "But what if I lose control?" Daniel knelt beside him, placing both hands on Kai's shoulders. "Listen to me. You're stronger than you think. Your power is not something to fear. It's part of you. Trust yourself." Kai hesitated. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Okay, I'll try." Vashana handed Kai a small energy amplifier, a circular device that fit in his palm. "This will help focus your power. Use it wisely." Kai took a deep breath. His golden eyes began to glow brighter, and the air around him shimmered. Energy crackled around his hands, lighting up the small cockpit with a soft golden hue. Outside, the Xaverian flagship moved closer, charging a massive plasma cannon. Vashana's voice was urgent. "They're preparing a final attack. If they fire, we won't survive." Daniel turned to Kai. "It's now or never." Kai stepped forward, closing his eyes. He took a deep breath, focusing all his energy. Then, he raised his hands. A powerful golden wave of energy burst from his body, rushing outward like a storm. The Xaverian warships were caught in the blast. The enemy flagship shuddered violently, its weapons short-circuiting as sparks exploded from its engines. The second warship was thrown back, crashing into a massive asteroid. Daniel watched in awe. Kai was doing it. But Kai was struggling. His body trembled, and he gritted his teeth in pain. The energy was too strong. Daniel rushed to him. "Kai, control it. Don't let it control you." Kai squeezed his eyes shut, forcing himself to focus. He thought of Daniel, of Vashana, of the people who had protected him. This power was not just his burden, it was his gift. Slowly, the energy around him began to stabilize. The golden light flowed smoothly, no longer wild and chaotic. Outside, the Xaverian flagship lost power completely, its engines going dark. The remaining enemy ship, seeing the battle lost, quickly turned and flowed into the void. The battle was over. Kai gasped and collapsed forward, but Daniel caught him. "You did it, kid," Daniel whispered, his voice full of pride. "You saved us." Kai looked up weakly and smiled. I controlled it." Vashana checked the radar. "The Xaverians are retreating. They won't be back anytime soon." Daniel sighed in relief. "Good." He looked down at Kai. "And you? How do you feel?" Kai took a deep breath. "Stronger." Daniel smiled and ruffled his hair. "That's my boy." Vashana leaned against the console, watching them. "So, what now?" Daniel thought for a moment. Then he smiled. "Now, we go home." Kai looked up. "Where is home?" Daniel placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Wherever we are together." Kai smiled. For the first time, he felt safe. As their ship left the mining station and disappeared into the vastness of space, Daniel knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning.